Welcome back to another FIREX Tech Talk, where in just a few moments' time we'll be joined by the team from C-TEC. C-TEC's new EVAC-ALERT system can be customised to create simple-to-use and cost-effective BS 8629 compliant solutions in any high-rise residential building. Housed in a robust, vandal-resistant locked cabinet accessible only by the fire rescue service in an emergency, C-TEC says its control panel features an intuitive interface, bright LED indicators and easy-to-operate toggle switches for each evacuation zone, and that each panel can connect to an array of evacuation alert devices. Find out more in the video coming up in just a moment, and afterwards you'll be able to put your questions directly to the C-TEC team. Join in the live Q&A session from the agenda or in the link below this video.
My name's Andy Scott and I'm Projects Director at C-TEC. I'm also Chair of the British Standards Committee responsible for fire alarm devices and a member of several other UK and European standards committees. Today I'm going to demonstrate C-TEC's new EVAC-ALERT system and also explain a little bit about the new BS 8629 standard for evacuation alert systems for residential buildings. Before I do, here's a short video.
Introducing EVAC-ALERT by C-TEC, a new UK manufactured evacuation alert system specifically designed to meet the exact requirements of BS 8629, the new Code of Practice for Evacuation Alert Systems for use by the fire and rescue services in buildings containing flats. Utilising C-TEC's powerful cast open protocol technology, EVAC-ALERT can be used to evacuate part or all of a residential building on a zone-by-zone basis in an emergency. Housed in a robust vandal-resistant cabinet of easy-to-operate toggle switches, the EVAC-ALERT control panel is connected via a series of monitored flat interface units to evacuation alert devices located inside individual flats. After consultation with the relevant fire and rescue services, flats are programmed to belong to building-specific evacuation zones, typically one zone per floor. In an emergency situation, should the fire and rescue service need to evacuate the building, they simply unlock the cabinet and activate the relevant evacuation zone control switch. This will cause all evacuation devices located in that zone to operate. Should the fire spread, more evacuation zones can be activated to ensure the safe and orderly evacuation of all at-risk residents. With an extensive range of evacuation alert devices, from self-testing sounders to visual indicators and vibrating pillow pads, EVAC-ALERT is a truly accessible BS 8629 compliant evacuation alert system. What's more, the system is fully compatible with C-TEC's secure, cloud-based and vision data management software, allowing verifiable system status information to be remotely reported to duty holders and other stakeholders. New regulations and recommendations in the Grenfell Tower Inquiry Report mean the demand for evacuation alert systems is increasing. If you have an inquiry, contact C-TEC today. You're safe with C-TEC.
You'll have gathered from the video that evacuation alert systems are not the same as normal fire alarm systems. Whereas a fire alarm sounds the alarm early in a fire event, evacuation alert systems are systems of last resort for use by the fire and rescue service if they believe the stay put or defend in place strategy has failed. That's why the term alert is used instead of alarm, and why no fire detectors or manual call points are connected to the system. As a system of last resort, an evacuation alert system must remain operational for extended periods during a fire. This has significant implications for the system's wiring, which I will go into later. Let's take a look at C-TEC's EVAC-ALERT system. The heart of an evacuation alert system is the manual control panel. which BS8629 refers to as Evacuation Alert Control and Indicating Equipment, or EC. C-TEC's EC is housed in this high security cabinet, which has been developed in cooperation with Gerda, a company that specialises in fire-rated door sets, and which was involved in the drafting of BS8629. In order to comply with BS8629, the cabinet is very strong and it has been certified to STS 205 BR2, which means that it can withstand deliberate attack. The security of the cabinet is of prime importance to the Fire and Rescue Service, who need to be confident that it will always be available and fully working. The cabinet is installed indoors near the Fire and Rescue Service access point, and as you can see, it is very clearly marked. The patented lock complies with EN 1303 and, most importantly, it uses copy protected keys that are already carried by the Fire and Rescue Service. Now, let's take a look inside the cabinet where EVAC-ALERT's controls and indicators are located. The first thing you will notice is that you don't see the controls and indicators normally associated with a fire alarm panel. This is because they're hidden behind this cover, so they can only be accessed by the maintenance contractor. This demo is configured for a 16-storey block, with the top switch controlling the top floor and the bottom switch controlling the bottom floor. There's a power present light, a power fault light, a general fault light, a fault warning sounder, and a button to silence it. Slide-in labels clearly identify the floors, and for each floor there is a robust toggle switch that operates the alert devices, a light to show that the alert signal is active, and a fault light. EVAC-ALERT can be figured with up to 48 zones in one cabinet, which is more than enough for most buildings. If more zones are needed, several ECs can be networked and mounted next to each other. Flicking a switch down operates the alert devices on that floor and lights the associated red indicator. Flicking the switch up turns them off again. So, if the fire is on the 14th floor and the Fire and Rescue Service decide they need to evacuate the building, they simply operate the relevant switches. As each switch is operated, the adjacent red light shows that the alert devices in that zone are working. Note that there is no evacuate all control. This is to reduce the risk of all residents trying to get down a single staircase at the same time. And that's it. As you can see, it's very simple for the Fire and Rescue Service to use, and also why it is so important that the cabinet is secure to prevent unauthorised access. Now, let's delve a little deeper and look inside the EC. At the top, we have batteries for up to 72 hours standby. Below, we have an EN544 certified power supply, and next to that, the wiring loop driver boards. On the front door, we have the manual control interface boards. Now, BS8629 says that the minimum number of fault-tolerant wiring loops is 1 for up to 4 stories, 2 for up to 10 stories, and 3 for anything taller. However, there are limitations on how many devices can be powered from a loop, and as a rule of thumb, we recommend connecting no more than 5 or 6 floors on a loop. As this is a 16-storey system, this EC has 3 loops connected. Now, let's take a look at the rest of the building. As I mentioned earlier, the fact that an evacuation alert system is a system of last resort has implications for the wiring. The wiring in each flat needs to be separated from the addressable loop by an isolation device that protects against open and short circuit faults that may be caused as fire spreads through the building. In this way, any number of faults on different flats can be present at the same time without affecting any other flats. Ctek have 2 methods of achieving this protection, the simplest of which is an interface outside each flat. The other method is a 4- or 8-way flat interface that can be installed in a nearby riser. This interface uses less power than the single interface, requires fewer connections, and it gives the ability to add an EN54 monitored power supply for visual alarm devices and vibrating pillar pads, should these be required. Now, let's take a quick look inside a flat. BS 8629 says that most flats will only need a single evacuation sounder, which should be installed near the entrance. Ctek's alert sounder is one of the loudest and most efficient on the market, and it also has a self-test function that avoids the need to listen to the sounder in each flat during annual maintenance. If necessary, more sounders, visual alert devices, and even vibrating pillar pads can be fitted. To hear what the alert sounder sounds like, I've asked one of my colleagues to activate the toggle switch on the EVAC-ALERT panel. So, in a moment, you will hear it sound. The sounder tells the flat occupants that they need to leave the building. I'm now going to return to the EVAC-ALERT panel. As you can see, I've removed the cover to the maintenance controls, which anyone who is familiar with Ctek's ZFP networkable fire alarm panels will recognise. In order to use the maintenance controls, for instance to test the sounders in individual flats, an engineer's code must be entered on the touchscreen. The use of Ctek's established EN54 certified fire alarm technology means that EVAC-ALERT can be incorporated with other systems such as Ctek's Grade C Hush Pro domestic fire alarms in the flats and a common fire alarm system installed to replace a waking watch. EVAC-ALERT can also be linked to Ctek's secure cloud-based Envision data management software, allowing system status such as faults, false alarms, confirmed alarms and manual evacuation events to be remotely reported, recorded and analysed. These events, along with building plans, can be displayed on desktop and portable devices. Using these technologies together can provide significant safety, management and financial benefits. So, when and where are evacuation alert systems required? At the moment, they are only required by law in Scotland in new residential blocks over 18 metres tall. However, the Grenfell Tower inquiry clearly recommended evacuation alert systems for new and existing high-rise buildings, of which there are about 13,000, plus about 500 new developments every year. The government says it will implement the inquiry recommendations in full and that it is working on evacuation alert systems with the National Fire Chiefs Council. The inquiry also questioned whether the definition of high-rise should be changed from 18 metres, which is an arbitrary number, to 11 metres, which is the safe working height of first response fire tender ladders. If this happens, the number of buildings in scope will exceed 100,000. Regardless of legislation, there's a lot of interest in evacuation alert systems as an inexpensive and effective way of giving occupants confidence that there is a plan B if the worst should happen. And that is Ctek's EVAC-ALERT system. If you would like more information or you would like to attend one of our free online CPD seminars on the new BS 8629 standard, please visit ctek.com for details. Thank you for your time, and as part of today's Tech Talk, I will now take questions.
Good stuff. Welcome everybody. My name's David McClellan. Welcome back to our next FIREX Tech Talk Q&A session, where joining me down the line, up the line, depending upon where you are in the country, all the way from Wigan, is Andy Scott, star of the film that no doubt many of you have just been watching. Andy, how are you doing today?
I'm absolutely fine. Thank you very much, David.
Absolutely fine. I'm pleased to hear it too. I'm absolutely average here in the Midlands myself. We've got loads of people joining in the conversation already, which is great. What would be the best thing for us to begin with is if in a nutshell, in a 30-second nutshell, if you could try and just describe EVAC-ALERT, just position it for us. Maybe people were joining the video a little bit late or joining the Q&A. So eager are they that they didn't get a chance to watch the film. Tied up for us. Tell us what it's about.
Okay, it's a completely new type of fire alarm system that has no detection, and it provides a plan B in case a building needs to be evacuated. So if stay put fails, an EVAC-ALERT system allows the fire and rescue service to selectively evacuate a building safely.
Super. Thank you very much indeed. Question, what's the response been like from building managers and local authorities so far to the new BS 8629 regulations?
They are all very, very interested to understand the standard and to see how it's applied. Lots of interest.
Tell us about the standard for anyone who isn't familiar with it. Just give us a little bit more about what it actually means, what it is that it's trying to achieve, what the context is.
Well, it came primarily because after the Grenfell Tower fire, Scotland decided to make it a legal requirement to have this kind of system on new builds over 18 metres. So consequently, there needed to be a standard. But when the Phase 1 inquiry report came out, it made a very clear recommendation that these kinds of systems should be installed, not just in new buildings, but in all high-rise residential buildings over 18 metres.
Right. Okay. Yeah. More questions coming in. What type of cabling is required, and does it interface with existing sounders in each apartment, or are they completely separate?
The way the standard's written, it's a completely standalone system. That is not for technical reasons. The system that we offer could be integrated with different systems. But the Fire and Rescue Service are mostly keen to make sure it's absolutely always working. So yes, and the cable type is enhanced throughout, because this is a system of last resort. This is, whereas a fire alarm normally goes off at the beginning of a fire, this is a system that is only used if the Fire and Rescue Service think they have no choice but to start to evacuate people.
Sure, okay. How often should these devices be tested?
The servicing of the system is every 6 months, but the devices in the flats are tested every 12 months.
Okay, good stuff. Keep your questions coming in, folks. This is good.
Oh, yes, and just to mention, we do a self-testing sounder. What this means is you don't have to have 2 people to do the testing. It can be done from the panel. Nearly forgot that.
Okay, no, you put it in there seamlessly. I don't think anyone noticed. All good. Talk to me about interoperability. Will EVAC-ALERT work with other vendors, fire alarms and alert devices, if applicable, I guess?
You can use any conventional sounder or VAD on our system. However, we strongly recommend, from a compatibility point of view, obviously, our own product. And they're also more competitive and louder, and they use less current than other people's. So the answer is yes, you could use other sounders, but we'd rather you used ours.
And another question here along the same interoperability lines: how does EVAC-ALERT tie in with other active fire precautions? For instance, can it be integrated with domestic fire alarms or with communal fire alarms and so on?
The standard says that it should be independent and separate from these other systems. However, the standard also says that they're going to review this point. So the answer to the question technically is yes. And we do grade C Hush Pro systems, which would perfectly suit this situation, but are far too complicated to explain how they would work. We can also integrate with L5 throughout the rest of the building, and the waking watch systems that are being recommended by the NFCC. So technically we can do all those things.
Good stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Here's an interesting one. Obviously, it's lots of conversation about installation, interoperability. Put my right teeth in today, it would help. But how about building occupants? How do they learn about the system? How do they know what sound is what? How do they get familiar with it? Do they get any training? What provision is in place for those? According to the standard,
the responsible person will be directly responsible for this. It's clearly stated in the user responsibility section. And what we tend to say is this is the responsibility of the building safety manager. Now, of course, that role doesn't legally exist at the moment, but it is strongly suggested it will exist when the building safety bill goes through.
Okay. Are there a minimum number of loops that should be used dependent upon building size? So how many loops might be required in a 12-floor building?
That's okay, I can answer that one. The standard has a very complicated clause, which you have to read several times to understand. But basically, up to 4 floors, including the ground floor, is 1 loop. Above 4 floors, up to 10 floors is 2 loops, and above 10 floors is 3 loops. So those are the minimum numbers. And then, of course, you have to take into account the current availability and common sense and the cost of running the cables and the practicalities of running the cables. So you could have more loops. And with our system, you can carry on putting loops on to suit the building.
Continuing that training theme a moment ago, are local fire brigades trained on how to use this system?
No, they're not at the moment, but the training material is being created. The National Fire Chiefs Council are working on training material at the moment. And I believe that the delay in bringing this in as an actual requirement is largely because it's very important that the Fire and Rescue Service guys are trained and gals are trained and know what it is, because many of them at the moment will not know what it is. If they're faced with this box on the wall, will they know what to do with it?
Absolutely. Tell us about, talk to us what you can about cost. We've got a question here in terms of typical systems, and then is there a monthly fee for the cloud management bit of it? What does the costing conversation sound like?
The cloud bit is about, how much is that, please?
It's not been tied down yet. The first 12 months is split.
The first 12 months on the cloud is included in the hardware.
Okay.
I'm going to have to get you an answer on the recurring cost. There is a recurring cost. As far as the kit is concerned, I've got some very clear prices. The example I use in the film is a 16-story building with 6 flats. So for that example, the equipment cost at trade price is under 16,500, which works out at just over £170 a flat, which I think you'll agree is chicken feed. That's plus the enhanced cable and the physical installation. If you use the 4-way 4-stroke 8-way flat interface that we mentioned, then that comes down to less than £133 a flat. And if you then add the power supplies, which allow you to put large current devices like vibrating pillow pads into the individual flats, then it goes back up a little bit, but it's still under £144 a flat. So this is cheap. This box people will perceive to be expensive because fire alarm people aren't used to this sort of thing, but it's about the same price as a fire door. Everything else is very, very ordinary fire alarm equipment prices.
Interesting question here. Can the system be installed as a wireless system?
The standard allows it, but we aren't doing it. We don't have a wireless solution to this. There's a few reasons for this. One is that we don't work with wireless a lot ourselves anyway. But another reason is we do have concerns about its reliability in an established fire. So we're not saying wireless fire alarms don't work. That would be silly. But we are concerned about the way wireless signals are affected by the aluminium, copper, and plastic carbon in smoke. The evidence on the internet that I've been able to find is a bit shaky. not shaky, no, it's actually good evidence, but there's not much of it. But there's a lot of apocryphal evidence, such as at Grenfell, about, anecdotal evidence about radios stopping working as the fire developed. So we're just nervous about wireless at the moment.
Understood. Thank you very much indeed. Another question here: can EVAC-ALERT be used in simultaneous evacuation?
If by what they mean there is the waking watch simultaneous evacuation system, technically there's absolutely no problem. You would simply add the relevant detectors to the system and it would work. However, of course, as I keep saying, the actual standard itself says it shouldn't be. So I think there's a lot of clearing up to be done of the overlap between standards. I must say that the only reason they say that it should be separate is because they are concerned that fire alarm companies and contractors and so forth will misunderstand how it has to go in, and they'll end up with something that isn't right. That is and they clearly state this in the introduction.
Right. We're going to wrap up in a moment's time. Now, any final questions that you've got, feel free to chuck them at us right now. You mentioned right at the top of your video, Andy, about your role in working with these standards. You know, you are active in a lot of trade industries and standards committees around here as well. And there's certainly been a bit of movement. You mentioned post Grenfell and so on. Do you see, is there any more kind of major changes on the horizon in terms of the regulatory and standards frameworks that building managers and so on are going to have to work to, or are we kind of reaching some kind of equilibrium for a while, do you think?
The main changes that are coming along are with the law, the fire safety bill and the building safety bill. From that, you'll come down to the building regulations, which I expect will be altered in due course. But as far as standards are concerned, there are no discussions that I'm aware of directly related to alarm systems. There are lots of work on competence. There's new work on competence, and there's new work on external wall systems, all sorts of other aspects of fire safety.
Super stuff. Final question coming, I think we'll have time for, is if stay put procedures change, does this change the effectiveness? I'm
not sure I understand that question fully. The stay put policy, as it has become called, was never really defined in the first place. It came out of a standard called CP3 back in the 1960s, which basically says if we built a concrete block and people probably don't need to leave. And that became, over time, a policy. And it's been enshrined in documents like the LACORS document, the LGA guidance documents. But at the moment, I think it will stay because it does work in most cases. What this provides, what this system provides, is, as I said right at the beginning, is a plan B in case other things go wrong. And anybody who follows the Grenfell Tower inquiry will be horrified as to how much went wrong there. Listen to the BBC podcasts, it's illuminating.
Well, listen, Andy, on that note, it's time that we wrapped up our session for today. Thank you very much indeed for joining us and answering, goodness knows, well over a dozen questions in about a dozen minutes. If anyone wants to find out more about EVAC-ALERT and get in touch with you, where should they go?
www.ctek.com.
Fantastic. Andy, thank you so much indeed for joining us today. Have a great rest of day. And if you're joining us for our next session, that will be starting in just a moment. We're going to be hearing from FireCo, and they're going to be talking about their DMS system. So head back to my agenda and you'll see the next session there. And I'll be joined by the team from FireCo for a Q&A. That's all for now. Speak to you shortly.